a video on lamb. So it's new season lamb at the moment, and it's quite well. It's never cheap, lamb, to be honest. Never cheap. I've never seen it that kind of thought, oh well, lamb's cheap. So I was in the supermarket and I was kind of like, if you want a leg of lamb, it's like 12, between 12 and 15 pounds a kilo, which is a fortune in my eyes. And then you kind of go down the scale of the price of lamb per kilo and what kind of joints that you can kind of get. So I was kind of curious. I'm not really a fan of a leg of lamb, but I do like a shoulder of lamb, or I do like a neck of lamb. I like the tougher joints that take longer to cook. I find them much more flavourful. So I would never buy a leg of lamb anyway. I would always buy a shoulder of lamb, but even shoulders kind of quite expensive. So that's a shoulder joint, and that's £8 a kilo, which is still kind of pretty expensive. So kind of and I wanted to do something with lamb, and I thought, well, that's still kind of a little bit expensive for what I want to do. I think that, I mean, even if it feeds 4 people, that'd feed maybe 2.5 people, maybe 3. But that's expensive, is that? It's like £7.40 or £7.38 for 3 people. That's expensive, is that? So then I was like, well, it's all right if you're doing joint and you want to splash out. That's okay. But what if I wanted to do like a dish that was just I just need chunks of lamb, like diced lamb. Even the diced lamb and the minced lamb was expensive. So, but then I was looking around and we get the ribs of lamb, which is £5 a kilo. So that pack is £2.06. So I was like, it's not such a bad price. And then we've got for the £5 a kilo, which is £2.50 for that. We've got some lamb breast. So I look at them, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, there's a bit of fat on there, but there seems to be quite a lot of meat. So I was kind of interested in finding out what the kind of meat to fat to ratio and price ratio that kind of they are. So I'm going to cook all three bits of lamb quite simply, and then I'm going to strip off the any bone out of them and any kind of fat and not particularly nice bits like the gristle and all that kind of thing, and we're going to see how much actual meat that we get for our money, and then we'll do some kind of calculation and work out which is kind of best. I think if you can do a roasting joint or a slow braised joint, shoulders always best. I'd stay away from shanks. I think shanks are too expensive as well. So shoulders always best for a low and slow. But if you're wanting to do like a dish with lamb, which I am, is it kind of worth buying the cheaper cuts? But anyway, so I'll cook them simply. I'm going to cook them in the same pan. It doesn't need to be any kind of experiment. We do things separately. So out of the packaging. I don't normally buy lamb from the supermarket, if I'm honest. I normally buy it from the butcher's shop. And then we don't have all this packaging because I don't like plastic waste and all that. So we've got those can go there. I'm not going to brown anything off. So this doesn't feel like, it says lamb ribs, but it doesn't feel like there's many ribs or bones in there, so that's okay. And then we've got the breast, which will have the bones in, so that'll affect the kind of price, so that's fine. And then we've got some stock from the other day, and then we've got I've got a jar of chicken stock that I made. Oops, which the top wasn't on properly. How's that taste? No, it's fine. I just loosened it. So let's just taste that. Yeah, that's fine. So that can go in there, like that. And then we're going to put some tin foil on the top of it, and then we're going to slowly braise that at 120 degrees until it's all nice and tender. The ribs will probably be cooked before the shoulder, so we'll just pull out as we kind of go. Maybe cook the shoulder for long enough, but it's going to take minimum 4 hours, minimum. But what we can do is because it's a metal tray, we can put it on the gas or hob to start off with, and bring it up to temperature, bring it up to a boil, and then put it in the oven, and that will speed up the cooking process, which I think we'll do. We'll do that. We'll put this on top of the stove, melt the stock heat it up, get it to a higher temperature, and then that'll speed up the cooking process. And then we'll put it in the oven at 120 degrees until it's cooked, which might be 3 hours, might be 4 hours, might be 5 hours. It'll just take its time. But anyway, that's what we're going to do, and then we'll come back and we'll strip off the meat. I want to make like a bit of a lamb pie type of thing. Well, a lamb and feta and stinging nettle pie. But that's be a completely another thing. So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll strip all the meat off and we'll kind of weigh and kind of do a quasi-scientific experiment because it won't be exact. But anyway, that's it for the moment. So as you can see, the stock is coming up to the boil. It just speeds up the cooking process. I'm not that bothered that that lamb's not going to be submerged under entirely the stock, because we're going to cover it with some foil. The top of it will steam, and the bottom will slowly braise. So it's fine. I'm not bothered about it being completely immersed in the what we call it, in the stock. So, but this is a really good tip of how to kind of speed up the cooking process of things. If I was just to add the cold stock to that pan, then put that in the oven would have to heat up the stock and the lamb, and it would take longer than doing it this way. This is just a more efficient way of doing it if you want to kind of speed up the process, type of thing. And also, what's the ratio? Yeah, so if you cook something on top of the stove, it takes half the time that it does to cook in the oven. A chef once told me that, and I believed it, and it's true. So we just kind of speed up the process on the top and then put it in the oven, and then it will slowly cook in the oven. We don't have to think about it. The danger when you cook things on the top of the stove is it's just not as controllable as the oven, because the top of the stove hasn't got a thermostat like the oven has. The oven's got a thermostat, so it'll keep things at a temperature that you want it to be. So if you set the thermostat for 120 degrees, it's going to stay at that temperature. Yeah, so that's it. I've seen stocks made in the oven, and it seemed like a really kind of quite good idea. But anyway, so that's just one of those tips, just to kind of speed up the cooking process. I will turn the lamb over halfway through, so the bottom of the top then gets a chance to braise in the juices. But there's some liquid going to come out of the lamb, and it doesn't look like there's enough liquid at the moment, but by the time the end of the cooking happens, there will be more liquid in there because it'll come out of the lamb. But I'm waffling, as always, so I'll stop and I'll put some foil on and we'll put it in the oven as it's come up to a good enough temperature to start cooking it properly. Right, so the lamb's had about 4.5 hours, something like that. I've let it cool down slightly so I can touch it with my hands, but it's all nice and tender, and as you can see, it's wanting to just pull apart, which is what we want. So I'll drain off the stock, I'll go through it, I'll separate all out the bones and the meat and the fat and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll weigh how much fat we've got in each from each jointy thing or the ribsy things, and then we can calculate which is better value for money, which is pretty straightforward. But it's just a case of picking through with your fingers. You don't need to see me do that. It's just I'll make a mess and then I'll have to touch the camera and all. So I'll go through it all, and then we'll do a bit of a weigh up and see which is better value. Right, I have done some stripping, I've done some calculating, and we have some conclusions. And so that's the meat from the ribs, and we ended up with 168 grams of meat. This is from the breast of the lamb, and we ended up with 161 grams of cooked meat. And this is from the shoulder, and we ended up with 357 grams of meat. So it's kind of, calculations are a bit of a funny one, because it's the different prices and all that kind of stuff. So I just kind of thought what we'll do is we'll just work out what percentage of the joint was actually meat that we got, and then for the rest of it was kind of waste. And the ribs come out on top. So the ribs, it's like 40% of the ribs was actually meat, and as that's a lot cheaper than we'll go through the percentages. So this was the ribs were 40%, the breast was 32% meat, and the shoulder was 38% meat. So percentage wise, the ribs come out on top, and also cost wise, the ribs come out on top. So if you're just wanting some lamb meat to do something with, or eat, if you're on a real kind of like budget and you just you want some lamb, and you're not particularly bothered how you kind of get it. So if you're doing like a lamb stew or something like that, your best bet is the lamb ribs. Obviously, kind of, it's difficult. They're not all a uniform type of thing. It's not like 3 different types of mince and me working out how much fat is in each kind of mince. It's not like a uniform type of thing, and it all depends on kind of what you want to kind of use it for. But the ribs are the best value by far, and the cheapest, and you get the most meat for the weight of it. So if you wanted to use lamb for something, the ribs are the best bet to go for. Obviously, I purposely went through the packets and kind of felt the packets, and you can kind of tell which packets had maybe a little bit more bone in the others. So I purposely picked one that had the least bone in, but I did the same with all the joints. So that's my advice. If you're wanting just some lamb to cook into something, which I am, then your ribs are your best bet, and the cheapest by far. The shoulder's not that far behind, but obviously the shoulder cost more per kilo. So you're still off best with the with the ribs. But there we go. And I don't know what. There's obviously some other calculations there if I was to buy a leg of lamb, but I'm not going to buy a leg of lamb because I don't need one. I'm not particularly a fan. It's all right, but there you go. Just a quick experiment. Wasn't that quick. On the best way to get the most meat from a lamb joint, and it's from the ribs.